Kyle Busch has yet again found himself in trouble with NASCAR. We'll talk about it more in this upcoming episode.
But if you close your eyes.
What is up, everybody? My name is Jack Quinn. Welcome back to the channel. And as I stated earlier, today we're going to be talking about Kyle Busch. And then after, I'm going to dive into the recent next-gen NASCAR test for the NASCAR Cup Series teams. So, Kyle Busch just recently got fined $50,000 for his actions regarding Darlington. Now, as I talked about in the last video, and I talked about the playoff drivers' struggles between Bowman, McDowell, Byron, Kyle Busch, Chase Elliott, all these top guys that are in the top 16 and the playoff struggles that they had, Kyle Busch was probably one of the more severe out of all of the accidents taking place, besides McDowell's, because McDowell's incident put him 20 points below the cut line. I think it was on one of the restarts after either during stage 2 or after stage 3, like after the restart for stage 3. Kyle Busch and Austin Dillon make contact. Kyle Busch goes sliding into the outside wall, damages his race car. His day is done. He pulls into the garage, pulls into the pits, parks behind his hauler, climbs out, goes to the medical center, and all is well. And later, after he was checked and released from the infield care center at Darlington, he had this to say with Marty Snyder.
That's okay, Dale Jr. Hey, the contact with the 3, what's your take on that?
It wasn't the 3's fault, so just take our lumps. You know, we're running like shit. We got wrecked, so that's what you get when you run like shit. And it just shouldn't be there. I don't know what our problem is, but every time we go to sim and use him and think we have a good sim session, we go to the racetrack and we suck. So I'm done with that, and we'll have to use some other tools on figuring out how to be good. But the M&M's Camry was not very good, and we're running terrible, and we got wrecked. It wasn't the 3's fault.
I know the frustration is there, Kyle, but do you allow yourself to think about the next 2 racetracks where you're so good?
Who cares? We'll get what we get.
Obviously, a very frustrated Kyle Busch, and I can't really blame him. But what was interesting was that he didn't put any blame on Austin Dillon whatsoever. He put the blame on mainly the team. He put it on himself and the team. And he even said that if we can't run well, we can't win. Which, in today's world of NASCAR, if you're not running good, you won't win. We've seen how that works with Jimmy Johnson in the past. We've seen how it works with Denny Hamlin. We've seen it work with Martin Truex. Truex, who went from being a championship-winning driver back in 2017, although his performance has been up there and he's been able to win races the last couple of years, he hasn't been very consistent. And obviously, consistency is a huge thing in NASCAR. Look at Denny Hamlin this year. Hasn't won a single race, but was the leader of the points for the majority of the season and was in a close-knit battle with Kyle Larson for the regular season championship. And as soon as the playoffs start, he wins Darlington. So I can get where Kyle Busch's frustration is coming from. But what he did before he parked his car behind his hauler is what cost him. When Kyle Busch drove into the pits, he drove into the garage entry on pit road. But it was blocked off with cones, as it was technically the entryway to the pits from the garage rather than the exit way. As he ran through the cones, he was going at a pretty quick pace compared to normal. And as he went through those cones, several NASCAR crew members, fans, and NASCAR officials were in the way. Kyle Busch's actions put many people's lives at risk or in danger due to his actions and his attitude. And Kyle Busch, after he got out and did his interview, didn't say a word regarding it. Almost like he did it on purpose, which, knowing Kyle Busch and knowing his past history, I wouldn't put it past him. And with those actions, he got fined $50,000 by NASCAR. And even Kyle Petty, on Motor Mouths on this Wednesday, he even said that Kyle Busch should be fined. Or it was Monday. It was Monday, not Wednesday. It was Monday. Kyle Petty said on NBC's Motor Mouths on Monday that Kyle Busch should be at least fined. Obviously, those words came true. Now, to some people who are not new into NASCAR, Kyle Busch has had a history with NASCAR officials or with previous drivers. He has a history of causing problems. We look back at 2011 between him and Ron Hornaday. Texas race in the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series. Ron Hornaday and Kyle Busch were racing hard going into 1 and 2, and they both ended up going into the wall, causing a caution. Kyle Busch, who wasn't particularly happy with Ron Hornaday, proceeded to return the favor to Ron Hornaday and wreck him going into 3 under caution. That action resulted in Kyle Busch not only being parked for that race, for the remainder of that race, but also parked for the remainder of the Truck Series schedule, as well as parked for 2 weeks in the NASCAR Cup Series. And who filled in for Kyle Busch in the Cup Series? None other than Michael McDowell. The following year, or in the previous year, at the same racetrack, 2010, Kyle Busch was caught and seen on live television flipping off a NASCAR official with not 1, but 2 birds. You know what I'm talking about. That action also cost Kyle Busch getting fined. We look back to 2017. We look back to 2017, Las Vegas Motor Speedway. Joey Logano and Kyle Busch. A very common rivalry. Just common rivalry in general between Team Penske and Joe Gibbs Racing. Ford and Toyota. Constant rivalry, but especially Joey Logano and Kyle Busch. On the final lap of the Pennzoil 400, or back then it was the Cobalt Tools 400 at Las Vegas Motor Speedway, Joey Logano tried to use his Sloan teammate, Brad Keselowski, as a pick to get around Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch didn't like that, made contact with Joey Logano down the back straightaway, and going into 3 and 4, Joey Logano turned him. Kyle Busch ended up spinning down into pit road, while Martin Truex Jr. went on to win the race, and during Martin Truex Jr.'s victory celebration out on the front stretch, Kyle Busch marched over to Joey Logano's car, and a fist fight begun on pit road.
Trouble on pit road.
Is that Kyle Busch in the middle there?
It's Kyle Busch and Logano.
Kyle Busch and Joey Logano's crewmen involved there. Let's show you what happened out on the track to precipitate this.
A little bit of blood on the forehead there, Kyle Busch.
18.
Going down the back straightaway.
He's coming off 2, headed down the back.
Straight bow. They go to the inside of the 2. Little bit of contact. The 22 gets to the white line. Oh, he gets loose underneath them.
Yeah, he gets into him.
I mean, it certainly wasn't intentional. It's just aggressive driving, going for the position.
Watch Kyle keep it out. Keep it off.
And then this, after the drivers climbed out of their cars.
It's like Kyle goes after Joey when Joey tried to talk to him.
They pulled Joey away, and that's Kyle with the 22 crew. Vince.
With Joey Logano now, and
So, in previous years, Kyle Busch has been known to have a temper. And honestly, I'm not surprised that Kyle Busch got fined for his actions. I feel as though it should be more since he put other people at risk. But I'm glad he got fined. And it should be a lesson learned for Kyle Busch. I mean, you look at his brother, Kurt. His brother, Kurt, has been known to have a temper. He has had trouble with NASCAR officials before. But over the last few years, since 2014, Kurt Busch has actually calmed down a lot. And is actually really calm and cool on the radio. It's very rare nowadays to see Kurt Busch get verbally upset. So Kyle Busch should take a couple of couple of pointers from his brother Kurt. Now, moving on from Kyle Busch to next gen. The next gen car is set to debut in 2022 for the Daytona 500 and for Daytona Speed Weeks. Obviously, this is a new car for NASCAR as they are moving from the Gen 6, which has been around since 2013, to the brand new car starting next year. Now, originally, the next gen car was supposed to come out this year for this year's Daytona 500, but due to COVID restrictions and ultimately COVID in general, last year, they pushed it back one more year to get more testing done. And over the last couple of years, we've seen drivers like Chris Buescher, Ricky Stenhouse, Martin Truex, Chase Elliott, Kurt Busch, Joey Logano, Brad Keselowski, some big-name drivers testing the new car on a variety of tracks. We've seen it test on the Charlotte Roval for road course races. We've seen it test on the Charlotte mile-and-a-half track for a lot of the cookie-cutter tracks or mile-and-a-half tracks on the schedule. We've seen it tested at Daytona as well for the Super Speedway package. But yesterday, we got to see several teams, ranging from Hendrick, Penske, Stewart-Haas, and Joe Gibbs. We got to see a lot of teams out there with at least one or two cars testing, drafting, and the Super Speedway package for next year with the next-gen cars. Obviously, the next-gen cars are going to be a lot slower compared to this year's car. They're going to be running, I believe, the 750 horsepower package on majority of the racetracks, but a lot of major differences for the next-gen cars for next year. One obvious change is the wheels. NASCAR has been known to use 5 lug-nutted wheels. Well, starting in 2022, they're going to a single lug-nut wheel, which is very common in other types of motorsports. Formula One, IndyCar, Rallycross, all of those sports have single lug-nutted wheels. So, am I surprised that NASCAR has gone into this direction? Not at all. Another change coming to the next-gen cars is the number placement. For the last several years, we have been accustomed to the numbers being on the door. Well, last year during the NASCAR Bristol All-Star race, we got to see a different number placement. The numbers were slid back towards the rear wheel for the All-Star race, as well as we got to see an underglow that should be added to some of the cars, especially on Bristol. But is that going to happen? No. But what we did see was the number placement being slid backwards from the door towards the rear wheel. Now, this year, more news has been confirmed regarding next year's car. In a post from 2311, the team owned by Denny Hamlin and Michael Jordan, and have current driver Bubba Wallace in the 23, they announced that they are expanding to a 2-car operation, the second car being the number 45, the same number that Michael Jordan wore when he returned to the NBA. And that secondary car is going to be sponsored by Monster Energy and is going to have Kurt Busch driving in the number 45 Toyota. That news was announced a couple weeks ago during Daytona. And along with that announcement by 2311 Racing, it also confirmed the number placement for 2022 in the next-gen cars. For 2022, the numbers will be slid forward towards the front wheel of the car. Obviously, the numbers are going to be the same size as what they were on the door for this year and the last several years, but it's opening up a lot bigger sponsorship space. And we saw that a lot with the revealed car for 2311 and Kurt Busch. Obviously, this is a huge win for a lot of these smaller race teams and for some of these big race teams. Obviously, a lot of these big teams like Joe Gibbs, Team Penske, Hendrick Motorsports, Chip Ganassi, and Roush Fenway don't really need a whole lot of money because they've got a lot of sponsorship money behind them. But a lot of these smaller teams like Rick Ware Racing, Colleague Racing, who's going to be a brand new race team next year, 2311, who's only a single car operation this year but has money with behind them, this is also going to help them get more money. As well as Starcom Racing in the 00 with Quinn Hoff, as well as several other small teams, including some new teams like GMS Racing, who are going to try and run a full-time schedule next year. Driver is yet to be announced for GMS Racing, though. So with this added sponsorship space on the car, it's going to bring in more money to these race teams, and it's going to bring in more money for these teams to spend. Now, obviously, with the next-gen car, all the chassis are going to be built the same. So a lot of these race teams don't have to worry about building and fabricating new chassis. So that can put more money into research and development programs for their power units, or engines as they're called. So it's going to be a big benefit to some of these smaller teams who maybe only have 1 or 2 charters but don't have the equipment to run up front with these new guys. And that's the whole idea behind the next gen, is to kind of create a level playing field for all teams. This year we saw one of the new Cup teams who are going to be making their full season debut next season with Justin Haley as their full-time driver and Kaz Gralla and AJ Allmendinger as their secondary part-time drivers in their second full-time entry. Colin Grayson, who's only been in a handful of events this year. They raced their way into the Daytona 500. They ran the Daytona road course the following week. They've run Circuit of the Americas. They also just recently ran the Indy road course, and the Indy road course was won by AJ Allmendinger. And all these races that Colleague Racing has been into, they've been competitive. They've been up front. So obviously, with the next-gen car, we're going to see Colleague Racing potentially be a contender for the championship with Justin Haley. So this next-gen car is obviously going to help a lot of teams in a big way. We could also see Rick Ware Racing be a potential top 25, top 20 race team, as right now they're currently a top 35, 30 race team. And obviously they've got around 3 or 4 different charters. But, in recent news, Rick Ware Racing is looking to sell a couple of their charters as they don't have enough money or funding to prevent 4 full-time race cars. Obviously, the charter system, which was announced a couple of years ago, helps them out, but without sponsorship funding, they're not going to be able to. So now, with a lot of teams cutting costs on not having to build chassis and bodywork, they can focus on a lot more other aspects of the race car, like their engine and tranny. So obviously NASCAR is evolving. They're making it into a more money manageable sport, kind of similar to how F1 works. So honestly, I really enjoy what NASCAR is doing right now as a race fan myself, as a young race fan, because it's going to be a lot more enjoyable. It's going to be interesting to see some of these smaller teams and lower named drivers in the Cup Series potentially become competitive race teams and competitive drivers in competitive equipment. Now, obviously, when I listed Chip Ganassi is doing testing for the charter system and for Trackhouse Racing, as earlier this year, Trackhouse bought Chip Ganassi. And a lot of teams and a lot of fans were questioning, why is Ganassi testing the next-gen car if they're not going to be in NASCAR for 2022? Simple rule is Trackhouse Racing. Trackhouse spent a bunch of money in purchasing the charters and the shop from Chip Ganassi. Now, Ganassi is still going to be big in IndyCar. They're a huge IndyCar team. So we're still going to be seeing them around in IndyCar and in IMSA Sports Car Series. But Trackhouse doesn't have the logistics to go out and test these cars. So whatever data Chip Ganassi gathers from these tests is going to be beneficial for Trackhouse Racing. And the driver that they had for this test was none other than Ross Chastain, who's confirmed to be piloting the #1 machine for Trackhouse Racing, along with Daniel Suarez in the 99. So obviously, there is a reason behind Chip Ganassi testing these cars for Trackhouse. There's a definite reason. So, with everything that has gone on and the current testing that is going on at Daytona, that has been going on yesterday and today, we're looking to get more information about how the car is going to run, super speedways like Daytona and Talladega. This is going to be a huge benefit for us to see what to expect for next year. But there's been a lot of controversy behind the next-gen car. Obviously, mainly following the number placement. As I stated before, the numbers are being slid forward. And a lot of NASCAR fans and a lot of race fans are up in arms about the number placement. Personally, to me, as long as it's not affecting the racing and affecting the driver's ability to race these cars, do whatever they want with the numbers. Obviously, don't shrink the numbers or go away with numbers completely. But in the ARCA series, they don't have a set position of the numbers. I've seen when Harrison Burton ran back in the 12 for ARCA, he had a tiny number on the corner panel, right behind the rear wheel. So obviously, NASCAR is somewhat smart in having the same size number but slid forward. So that's good, but it's a decal. And when I see fans get upset about the decal change, it kind of irritates me because it's like, it's a decal. As long as it's not affecting the racing and the overall ability of these cars and the handling of these cars, why complain about it? I get the controversy and the complaining about the single lug-nutted wheels because you're like, oh, this is NASCAR, it's supposed to have 5 lug-nutted wheels. Well, this is also going to help teams with speed on pit road, because valuable seconds can be made up or lost on pit road. And we've seen in the past, you may only get 2 or 3 lug nuts tightened in a quick pit stop, and that could ultimately lead to problems out on the track, and it could become a safety issue. We've seen countless drivers and teams get penalized for having loose lug nuts or loose wheels. We've seen some drivers even lose their wheel due to a loose wheel or have a flat. So obviously, going to the single lug nut is not only better for pit road times, but it's also better for teams as it can cut down on loose wheels. Now, obviously, if you have a loose wheel with a single lug nut, you're doing something wrong. But overall, it's a smart move, and it's going to prevent a lot of L1 type penalties, which involves lug nuts and safety infractions. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked that, hit that subscribe button, and don't forget to hit that like button. Gives it a thumbs up. And as always, I will see you guys in the very next video. So long.